Hey everybody, I decided to give it a go and try to give you a review of this Graflex Speed Graphic camera that I've been having fun with for a while. The way that I actually obtained one of these is I went to a thrift store and I was looking for something else, and when I was ready to leave, I turned around, looked behind me, and up about 7 feet high on a shelf I saw this black box, and I was like, wow, this looks like one of those press cameras, and I'd really like to try it out. And so I went and tried and asked how much it was, and they said $50, and I was like, I have no idea if it works or not. There was no lens in it, but I was gonna take a risk on it, buy it, bring it home, play with it a little bit, see what I thought. Turned out to be a really interesting experience because I had to relearn so much of what I know about photography, or what I don't know about photography, especially large format, and then try to play around with this and make it work. So basically, let me try to give you an overview of the camera. Let me try to get into some of the basics, and if you have any other comments or if you hear me say something that's not correct, please correct me, no problem. Just make comments on the YouTube video. I would love for the community to participate in this. Okay, so basically Graflex is a company that used to make, amongst other things, these so-called press cameras, or these 4x5 large format cameras. And so I think a lot of times in the movies you're going to actually see photographers kind of having one of these with a big flash attached, and they're kind of running after stars, or if there's some investigation going on, taking a picture and so on. These were very popular, and that's why they were called press cameras, because they took pictures on a really nice big negative, and there was a lot of detail and resolution there. So let's just jump right into it. The way that you open one of these is there's actually almost like a bump on the top that's a hidden button, and when you press that, the front is going to drop open, and that is going to eventually then allow you to pull the lens standard and the lens out and set it into the position where you can start focusing the camera. Before I do that, just a little bit of history. These came in different versions. This is the anniversary Speed Graphic. This one's about 1945. That's one of the reasons why I like it. It's because it's completely black. It's my understanding that during the war, they, for one reason or another, didn't use any shiny metal or chrome, so everything was black. So these are a little bit more unusual to find them market than some of the other ones. Another thing to mention is what makes Speed Graphic different than your other two models that you see out there, the Crown Graphic, and I forget the name of the other one, but either way, similar Speed Graphics that are not Speed Graphics, is that this one has actually a focal plane shutter built in the back, so it adds some to the weight, but you can actually shoot with this camera by leaving the lens open. In other words, not using the shutter built into the lens. Instead, you end up using the shutter that's actually built in the back of the camera. And there's a kind of a cute, archaic, and interesting way how you go about setting shutter speeds. But this one is called Speed Graphic because it actually had the capability of shooting up to 1/1000th of a second with the lens open the entire time. Okay, so let's just jump into it. First of all, let's talk a little bit about this lid cover door, whatever you want to call it. There's probably a better term for it. It locks into place here, and there's another position that it could go down into. So when you press on these sides, it will drop down to another position, and the reason why it can do this is because if you were to mount, say, a 90mm large format wide angle lens, you don't want this front standard to be in the way, because the lens is actually going to be very recessed and very close to the film plane, and so if this is not down, then it's going to get in your shot. So this is a cute little feature that allows for you to use those wide angle lenses. And one of the questions that I had to answer for myself, well, geez, can I still focus? And yes, you actually can, because the way this is all built, this moving focusing rack actually extends all the way under the lens, and so it can still move the lens. And with the wide angle lenses, you really don't have to move them that much, so even this little will actually be enough in most times to focus some sort of a landscape shot if you want to use it for that purpose. If you press on it again, just like I did, it will lock itself back up in that position. If you press one more time and hold it pressed, which isn't always that easy, well, I already did it, then it's going to close and shut. Okay, next thing you usually would want to do before you take a picture is take this front standard out. And the way you do that is there's a kind of a circular knob here that you have to unlock and put in a central position, and then kind of allows for this front standard to slide out. So I don't know if you are able to see that or not, but it kind of moves in and out like this. And then there's these so-called infinity stops that exist on the camera, that this is what you want to butt up against and stop, and that will actually help you with focusing if you're using the rangefinder function. Okay, so once you have that in place, you of course want to make sure you have a lens mounted. I already have one mounted on this camera, but if you want to dismount the lens and put another one in, this top plate here, you can slide to the left and out of the way. That allows you to actually pull out the, this one's a little hard to pull out, but there it comes, to pull it out, and you can replace your lenses. Now this is a whole other little large format camera learning curve. The plates are pretty much different for every camera, so you have to make sure you get the one for your camera. There's some that are more standard out there, like Linkoff technical ones, but the Speed Graphic size is specific to Speed Graphics, or Graflex really. And in it, you can then mount the lenses. But the lenses mount by unscrewing the back of the lens, or if it's already done, then you put the lens in and screw it in. And there are different size holes depending on the size of the shutter that a particular lens has. So my lens is so-called Copal 0. That's the smallest hole size. Then it goes Copal 1, Copal 2, and I think there's also a Copal 00. Don't hold me to it, doesn't matter. The point is you have to know and ask a person you buy the lens from if you don't know what Copal size or what hole size is the shutter, so then you can eventually put it into a board. Okay, so hopefully you matched your lens steel board, which I got done on the first time, and this was just one I bought from eBay. It's not original, but a gentleman here in Chicago and Illinois area makes them and sells them on eBay, and I think they work just fine. They're a little hard to press in, so give me just a second and I'll do that, and then we'll get back to the video. Yeah, this is all fun of working with these. Okay, now a lot of people ask about what about movements that you can have with these cameras, and in general I would tell you, in my opinion, these cameras are really not made to have a lot of movement. It's not really about the movement, because for that you're going to want a field camera or something like that. But this particular one I have here has 2 screws, and if you unscrew the 2 screws you can move the standard up and down like I just did. Basically this is rise and fall, and that can help you with perspective a little bit. However, the lens I have on has very small circle of view top down with, say, aperture of 22, so you can't really move it up and down a lot without getting vignetting or completely losing the image on the back plate. So basically don't use the movements on this type of camera. And you really don't need to so much. I can show you some of the images I've taken with the wide angle lenses and so on. I think even without the movements you still have a lot of freedom to operate. Okay, now let's talk about something else here. One of the ways how you can focus this camera is by using the sports viewfinder. You pull this out, and to match it you also can take this little, I don't know, what do you want to call a viewfinder aimer out and you can look through that and make sure that you have focused inside of that frame, and then that allows you to frame the photograph properly. That's one of the ways. There's about 3 different other ways that you can do this. Mine's a little crooked, so it has a hard time going in. Okay. Okay, so talking some more about the lens, there's 2 things you got to remember when you want to focus this camera using the background glass. You first of all have to have the aperture open up all the way so that you release the maximum allowed amount of light in, and then you also want to actually open up the shutter. And different lenses or shutter combinations work a little differently. Mine, you first have to cock the lens here, and then there's a little knob on the side that you pull down, and that opens it up, lets the light through, shines it on the back of the ground glass. You can then focus. The thing that you have to remember, which is not that easy, in some lenses it kind of tells you and won't let you take a photo, on some shutters I should say. In other ones it doesn't matter, you can make a mistake. So basically when you're done, focusing and composing your photograph, you actually have to remember to shut your shutter down so it's not letting light in when you don't want it to. Set your aperture to whatever you want it to be, say f22, and then you screw the cable release, which will let you take a picture without shaking the camera, and then when you press it, the photograph will be taken. Okay, so those are just some idiosyncrasies of working with a system like that. You have to know all this stuff. You have to keep it in the back of your mind. If you don't do it, disaster. And it's happened to me several times. Alright, so moving on to the back. Let's talk about the back. This camera has the so-called Graflex back. The reason why I like the Graflex back is because it's removable and allows you to put different other cassettes and inserts in. Like for instance, I have a Horseman 6x9 insert that will fit in here, and then after focusing I can basically take a 6x9 photograph. Graflex back is the more desirable kind. The way I tell is it kind of has these metal protrusions here, and when you press on them, the whole thing kind of comes off. Ground glass, as well as the this kind of a lid viewfinder that kind of creates a shadow while you're focusing. And while we have this off, you can now see the focal plane shutter, which is likewise shut. So if you remember before, even if I opened the lens and let the light through, this would have stopped it. So that was one of the things that I had to learn. Because finding information on this online isn't always that easy. It's like, how do you actually get this out of the way? And in order to know that, you have to know about how the entire shutter mechanism works. So let's talk a little bit about that. Basically, the way I would suggest you start is you take a look at this little plate that's going to be attached on the side of the camera, and it's going to have a table in it that across the top has letters, and across the side it has numbers. And then inside the table are shutter speeds. So if you, for instance, look at 125th of a second speed, you're going to see that you achieve that by setting the top to B and setting the tension to 5. Okay, so basically you have now a tension right here, and you have a little wind up, like a clock wind up here with the letter designation down below it, and you have to adjust those two in order to get the speed to be right. It sounds like a lot of work. It is. So right now my tension is set to 5 and my speed is set to C. So I actually have to wind this one more time counterclockwise. That's going to get me to D. But I want to be at B, right? So you actually have to release this twice, from D to C, and there's like a little trigger that you pull toward you that fires the shutter once. Now it's on C. If I fire it again, now it's on B. Now the setting is B5. That means next time I pull this toward me, I will actually release the shutter, focal plane shutter, and the speed is going to be 1/125th of a second. So if I release it, I will be at A. If I don't do anything, the next time it takes a picture, it's going to be at setting 8.5, which is 30th of a second. So in order to achieve 1/125th again, I have to wind it again to B. And now I have B5. It's going to take again 1/125th of a second shutter speed. Okay, the tension settings, there's a way to wind the tension and release the tension. So if you want to go release it, there's a little release button here. I can't really show it to you too well, but if you look at the manual, you can see it, and you kind of press it outward, not toward you, but outward, and it's going to go 5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 3, and so on. If you want to wind the tension, you take this knob and you rotate it toward you once, twice to get back to 4, once, twice to get back to 5. So now again I'm at 5A, that's 30th of a second. I want to be at 1/125th. I wind this one more time. Now I'm at 1/125th of a second, or 125th of a second. Fire it and it will release the shutter. So now that I explained how shutter works, let me actually explain how to get rid of this curtain. So if you just keep going down, if you keep basically firing the shutter without winding it again, you're going to end up with a setting of T, and after that a B. I think it's a B. it's marked as O or 0. That leaves it open. So now, if you want to focus on the ground glass and you don't want to use the entire speed graphic part of the speed graphic, you can set your shutter on the lens, make sure it's shut before you open the film for exposure, then fire the shutter in the lens. Shutter will open, let the light through onto the film. When you're done, you're going to protect the film, cock the shutter again, take the film out and move on to your next shot. Okay, so I'm going to put this back on, and because it's a graph lock, it actually has a way how it locks, so you kind of have these, I don't know, these G hooks that line right here where you need to go. It's kind of hard to explain, it's better if you ever see one. You press in to the left side if you're looking at it like I am, and it will lock in place. If you want to use the ground glass, like I said, you have to have your shutter open, and I don't, so I'm going to do it right now. And you want to have it at 4.7 so you have full light coming through. And then when you press this little button here, the little shadow box opens up and you can look through there and then focus the lens that way. Really nifty in my opinion. A lot of times I don't even need to have a dark cloth when I use this. I can just look through here and focus well enough. If you don't want this on, this took me forever to figure out, and this isn't even that hard. There's little two metal side retainers that hold this entire shadow thing in here. And see if I can figure out how to take it off here. It's not that easy while it's mounted, or I'm not good at it, whichever one you want to say. Okay, you're gonna have to take my word for it. I think it's actually easier if it's already open. Let me try this. There it comes. Alright, now you have the ground glass without this, and you can use a dark cloth or something similar to that for more protection. One thing I didn't do is, just a moment here, talk about inserting the film. So this is your standard 4x5 film holder. You're going to have to look at some other videos to see how to insert the film in this, because that's a whole procedure. But basically what you do is you pull out the dark slide about 3/4, one-third away. You open up this little lid. You slide the film under the little lips on each side, make sure it's in there all the way. You close this lid, you press the dark slide down, you lock it in place. Each dark slide has a bright area and kind of a, if you want to call it, a dark area. One more thing to mention about film, again, if you watch those videos or read about it, each film sheet has a notch that you have to put. This is your film sheet. The notch has to be in the upper right corner up here. You can feel it with your finger, and then you insert it in. If this is like that, you're not going to get the picture because the emulsion is only on one side of film. So if this was a sheet of film and you were inserting it in an imaginary holder here, you would actually feel with your finger that it's in the upper right corner, and then slide it in like that. Going back to my bright and dark side, if your film is not exposed, traditionally this would mean that it's not yet been exposed, and so once you take the picture, you want to insert the dark slide so that the dark side is facing outside and you know it's exposed. When I first started, I made a mistake several times when I slid it in the same way I put it in, and then 10 minutes later I couldn't remember, was it this side or this side that I exposed, and I ended up with the double exposure. So that's one of the million things you have to be careful about and learn when you're doing this for the first time. Alright, the way you slide the cassette or the film holder in is, this is also on a kind of a spring system, and you just lift that up. You don't have to be that gentle. You take it like this and just shove it in there all the way. Then when you're ready to take a picture, you pull the dark slide out, click, take a picture, make sure the dark is back out. You put that in, which is hard to do from where I'm at. Okay, and then if you want to take another one, you pull this out, turn it around, shove it back in, do it again. That's basically how that works. Okay, as far as the review of the camera works, something that I haven't talked about yet. is this rangefinder here. So the way that works isn't really that hard to explain if you've used any other rangefinder cameras, but it is a multi-step process, as it is with everything on this camera. So if you set the, let's say you're taking speed or speed graphic speed to, as we said before, B5. Now you know you're 125th of a second and you're out and about and you already have your film inserted. Now you can't see through the back of the ground glass, and how are you going to take the picture? Well, the way you're going to take the picture is you're going to look through here first. You're going to find the rangefinder patch, and you can read about those. Many other rangefinders work exactly the same way. And you're going to move the focus back and forth until you are in focus. And once that's the case, you're going to take the meter reading and figure out what your aperture needs to be for 1/125th of a second, usually say f11 or f16. You're going to set that up. You're also going to make sure that the shutter is open, because you're going to have to let the light through once you actually release the speed on your speed graphic, or take the shot basically. So then you have set the exposure, you have set the shutter speed, you have set the aperture, you open the lens, you have looked through the rangefinder, and you have focused. Now without moving, because if you move your focus is going to mess up, you can look through this upper right viewfinder here and compose your shot. And while you're doing that, hold your finger down. When you're all said and done and ready, take the dark slide out and go. Take a picture. Protect your film again from further adding exposure. Got the shutter again if you plan to use it in 1/25th of a second. Pull out your cassette, put it back in, and rinse and repeat. Sounds like a lot of work, and it kind of is. But honestly, just recently, which you can see in another video of mine, I went out and shot with these. And once you get it set and going, and you kind of have that rhythm of, you know, point the camera, focus, take the reading, shutter speed, aperture, all this stuff, pull the slide out, fire off the camera, put it back in together, 30 seconds. However, there's a million ways to mess this up. Sadly, there's ways to mess it up even after you're done. So if these are not very well protected or locked in place with these little lockers, there's little ways to lock these. They can pull out. So it's also happened to me once when I was in a camera bag. I actually kind of grabbed by one of these slides and exposed the film after the exposure, messed it up that way. Then when you're in a dark room, there's ways to crinkle this, not make it right, scratch it. So basically 1,000 ways to mess it up. And I think that's what actually makes this camera challenging and fun, is because the results are amazing, but to get there, it takes a lot of focus, attention to detail. It calms you down, it makes you think about what you're doing.
She's waiting.